Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And when it comes to news for EVE Online, well, we're still waiting for the deployment of the industry changes. It should come this month, so really be ready. Phase 1 is going to be the deployment of the new blueprints, because we will have new reaction materials and some stuff that will be needed for the production cycles. Data sites could be very interesting as well, at least for a while. We do, I think, all expect a little bit of oversupply from the data sites at some point, but yeah, that should be good. And next up, maybe quickly mention that there's new proving grounds out. If I'm not mistaken, it's 3 versus 3 destroyers, and there should be a CCP stream or some streams coming just tonight, a little bit after this EVE Talk comes out. 1800 EVE time could definitely be worth a watch to see some ships blow up and to see some people have fun in the proving grounds. Before we get started on the market, let's also take a quick look at the New Eden store and see what's happening here. If I'm not mistaken, we still have the sale going. Yep, a couple of very interesting ones. Skybreaker Blue Star Defender skins. These are definitely very unique, very niche, but you know, if you want a skin for your Edencom ships, they are on sale. Then we get Hazard Control skin, Zendo Isideco skin, Inner Zone Vanguard for the Atron. That's pretty cool. Definitely a yellow-orangey theme. Yeah, the Inner Zone ones are okay. The others, I mean, here the Osprey looks good. When there's too much white, don't really like them. But overall, they're still pretty nice. More sales for the full bundle here. Oh, and then look at that lava core skins. Those look really nice in my opinion. And then we've got some more stuff. Gila Abyssal. Ooh, Exostorm, man. I fly the Gila quite often, and it actually has this extra effect as well. That's pretty nice. So yeah, quite a few skins on sale if you want. There's definitely a lot of choice at the moment. And then of course we will take a quick look at the services, where you get 30 days Omega for 500 plex, and that becomes a free Punisher skin as well, if you want. So there's definitely some options in the New Eden store, and well, you may already have seen it from the ticker as well. May have had a little bit of an impact on the Plex market. So let's dive in. Let's get into the Plex stuff market coming in at 235. Oh. Like that, and let's get started. Here is Plex. We will start with the chart, and you can see the turnaround here. We are back above the 2.25 million mark on the chart here. Well, volumes are pretty normal, and then if we go for the prices in GTA itself, 2.4 million for the sellers, 2.274 million for the buyers. So this does look like a bit of a trend break. 5-day moving average moving up, 20-day moving average starting to move up here as well. These sales, of course, in the Plex store, New Eden store, excuse me, may be a big part of that. You know, if you get a free skin for 30-day Omega, there's definitely players that, you know, were planning to do so anyways. They might as well, you know, grab a couple and use some extra Plex for that. But overall, this does look like the potential start of a turnaround, like a bottom that has been formed as we reached below 225 million on the chart. Then outside of GTA we go down, well, not a lot, 237 million, so that's still just below 2.4 million. And the buyers are in the same ballpark, in fact a little bit more aggressive even, 2,374 million for the first buyer in the Perimeter Tranquility Trading Tower. So the first signs of potentially a trend break. We'll have to see if this is really the players, you know, their expectations going away from deflation and back towards more inflation. It's definitely possible. We know that ratting income in nullsec should be getting a little bit of a boost soon, and then that being amped up, I think, by, well, year low prices. Then we've got all the sales in the New Eden store, and that may be the signal that the market needs to really start to go back up. Will it be sustainable? Only the future can tell, of course. Next up we have the multiple pilot train certificates. These are also trying to form a bottom, still hesitating a little bit. For instance, on the 20-day moving average, that still hasn't shown that trend break, and it's only in the last 2 days or so that the 5-day moving average is starting to show an upward trend. A little bit above 1.2 billion for the sellers, and still just below 1.1 billion for the buyers. If you want to try to grab the bottom and you believe that Plex has started it, then of course multiple pilot train certificate could be still on the cheap side right now. A little bit of inertia there, I think, because of how much smaller the volumes will be, although yeah, ticked up a little bit in the last couple of days. For the skill extractor market then, we've got that same trend break, 5-day moving average crossing the 20-day. That one is starting to move back up as well. A little bit of a volume increase as well on a couple of these days where we basically reached the bottom. 264 million for the sellers to 60 million for the buyers. Very narrow margin, quite a bit of aggressive buying happening here at the moment. So I do think that the market is indeed starting to expect not just sales and things like that, but an actual turnaround. There's more stuff on the horizon as well, right? The anniversary for EVE Online, if that also gets translated to more sales in the New Eden store, rather than giving out a lot of stuff, rather than giving out potentially, you know, plex and discounts that way, then this could be, of course, indeed the start of an upward cycle. Let's take a look at the impact on the injectors then. Definitely a little bit late to respond if that's what's happening. Again, it's that same, you have to make a decision. It's a difficult one, but this then could be your chance to still grab a cheap large scale injector, because we have just reached another 1-year low point, touching on 600 million for the 5-day moving average. But I think it's pretty obvious here as well at the tail end of the chart that hesitation is starting to set in here as well. 608 million for the sellers, 582 for the buyers. And we are stopping, you know, you may still be able to buy a skill injector below 600 million at the moment, below these two, between these two, and make your investment if that's what you want to do. Again, I'm going to reiterate why I personally really like large scale injectors. It's got the extractor part, which is basically plex and does your hedge against inflation, but it also takes a little bit of a gamble on the future of EVE Online, and if CCP comes out with something that requires skills, new skill points and things like that, that players all of a sudden want to rush into, then of course you can have the perfect storm where inflation has driven up your large scale injectors, and then all of a sudden an announcement from CCP drives people nuts for these injectors, and you really are able to sell at a nice stop. That's my vision of these large scale injectors. They exist out of both an inflation hedge and a speculative part on the future of EVE Online itself, and so they make for an interesting investment opportunity, I believe. But of course, also looking at this 1-year chart, right? If you'd bought a year ago, you'd be in a lot of trouble right now. And I've bought one. I'm not sure if I still have it within the holdings. No. But I probably bought one just below 700 million or something like that as well. So there's definitely buying too early that you have to keep in mind as well when it comes to these types of investments, because, well, 600 million is still not nothing. Then we've got a small scale injector that, you know, does the same thing, still a little bit of pressure at that hesitation at the tail end. We don't have that very clear sign where the 5-day moving average crosses the 20-day again. Here we are still like trying to form that bottom. And we're talking 122 million for the sellers, 115 for the buyers. It's that same thing. If I were to still do an attempt right now, I would try to buy a small scale injector below 120, and I think that could be a very nice purchase, which potentially can still get sold to you, although it may end at any time, of course. After that, we've got the daily alpha injectors. After climbing back to 45 million, a very nice and high price, we're actually heading back down towards more average 40 million. It's still almost 45 for the buyers, for the sellers, excuse me. So they still want all of that ISK, but the buyers are down to 37.5. And in order to get these types of averages, that means that some people do dump to these buyers. A very large margin, especially compared to the other injectors that have a much more narrow margin, really again showcasing that the daily alpha injector is its own niche little market, and it really does its own thing. Compare that to the skill injector markets that have actually gone down for pretty much most of the year. This one has known a nice high point right here above 45 million, and I think that it's hit the mark when it comes to these types of injectors for the alpha clones. Very doable range, 40-45 million, right? Still below 50. That's something that they can earn in a foreseeable amount of time, and thus they can really see that effort being translated into progression for their alpha clone characters. Finally, we've got the hypercores that, look at that, at the tail end here, 5-day moving average crossing the 20-day moving average as well, showcasing that in all likeliness it's not the sales on the new Eden store that's dominating the shift here, but probably less expectation of deflation and inflation expectations are starting to take over. 246,000 to 250 almost for the sellers, 227 for the buyers. This may be the first sign of really a bottom starting to form. Now be careful, of course, we've been here before. Let's take a quick look at plex as well. Well, we haven't seen the 5-day crossing the 20-day though, unless you want to talk about this one area right here, but that was clearly not on a downtrend. So and that was obviously also on a CCP intervention right here due to these volumes. So this could really be the turnaround for these markets. I'm personally very curious to see what CCP will start to do with ratting income, and then of course also with the other potential sources of income, which they have teased at in videos, live streams, explanations, things like that. So the market is definitely starting to bet on that. Next up, the mineral market coming in at 11 minutes. Alright, and as always we'll start with titanium. Very interesting, 5-day moving average having a second leg up towards 7 ISK, so that demand is clearly still up at the moment in JITA. Let's put that filter on 713 for the sellers, 635 for the buyers in tranquility. A bit of a margin opening up. I think it's still more aggressive buying that has driven that price up, still trying to get those industry cycles to run on the current settings, you could say. And that means a lot of titanium, but keep one thing in mind, this will not last forever. As far as we know, demand for titanium in the new industry cycles will be a lot lower than it is now. That should definitely put some pressure on the price. So I would say if you have titanium lying around and you want some ISK, try to sell right now. It's probably the best it's going to be for close to the whole month. You could still have a little bit of a rush when these industry changes have their first introduction into the game, with only like the new drops, I think, and the new blueprints. But then you could see a final push, a final rush. But once the new blueprints or the blueprint changes come to the game in phase 2, that's when demand for titanium should really crumble, and it'll be too late basically. So make sure to keep a close eye on that. Now it's really only titanium, I think, that is taking the brunt of that which goes down in need. Stuff like pyrite will still very much have a higher need actually in a lot of these products, and you can see that we peaked up to 35 ISK and we're trying to maintain a price range of 30 ISK with the 5-day, 20-day moving average, getting together just a little bit below that. I think we're talking 29.93 for the first seller, so it's 30 ISK for the sellers, it's 26.28 for the buyers, and the averages will probably, you know, when the market is trying to find the current range, will probably find itself right in between these two. So expect a 28-ish ISK for pyrite for now, as the average supply seemed to be okay, but nothing completely outlandish. I mean, we get one seller of 129. I was trying at 30.26.73 here, but then 16-20 million. That definitely feels like an absorbable amount of pyrite that's on the market, and a very nice little jump right here to take advantage of. So it's also a bit of a choice, right? I don't think you want to mine for exclusively titanium at the moment. If you're mining in HiSec and you've got the choice, Veldspar, probably not what you want to go for. Sources of pyrite and potentially sources of Mexalon, or what you want to focus on, because Mexalon is still continuing its climb as well. That feels like it's almost out of bounds, but alright, it's going for yet another 1-year high point here at almost 200 ISK for the sellers, 184 for the buyers. And here it's really those mineral changes that have made Mexalon a lot less available. That seems to be shining through, because the biggest seller is of 14 million units, and then, you know, sellers are struggling to scrape together more than a couple million units of Mexalon, and demand is just there. And I don't think that one is, I mean, it could take a little bit of a crush as well, of course. One thing to note is that at the moment players are probably overstocking sitting on all of these ships because of the rush into industry on the current blueprints. So that will probably push back everything for a little bit, but longer term, you know, Mexalon definitely still in demand in Nullsec, and yeah, they need a lot of that. So your focus, if you can find it, sources of Mexalon for mining in HiSec, I think should be your focus. Yeah, this is over double the regular average price that I would put at around 75 ISK. So this is already very expensive, and this is why my thinking is that CCP may actually be happy with cheaper titanium, because pyrite's definitely recovering quite nicely and Mexalon is becoming super expensive. And I think they won't mind that the most available mineral will really become like a bit of a side product, but hunting for Mexalon, hunting for pyrite will become basically part of the game of, yeah, trying to get the most out of your mining, and that will dry up eventually, and then alright, well, will everything else that I want to put in, I'll put into titanium. So they have this hierarchy of availability and price, I think, is what CCP does want to go for. Then we've got for Lowsec, here is the Isogen chart that's already recovering very quickly. We went up to 70 ISK, very nice, finally a bit of a breakout and a chance to sell at a better price than that 40 to 50, probably 45 ISK on average here, but it is going down very quickly. 55 for the sellers and 49 for the buyers, and I'm still gonna hold to my theory because this is very noticeable. 49,377, so that's 50 million units that came to the market. Here's another 50, here's another 50, here's another 50. We must not forget that that 1.8 billion unit sell order is still floating around out there. So those are still Isogen stocks that are not, you know, in a smarter way, in my opinion, trying to be unloaded for better prices in smaller chunks so as to not completely spook the market. But it's still way too much. Even the volumes having increased quite noticeably here for the last 10 days or so, it's still too much Isogen that's available, and so we're still slowly churning our way through these old stocks that will eventually they will deplete, and then we should start to see an upwards trajectory for Isogen. But this right now, yeah, it's just more consumption that's finally happening, but it is also probably temporary, as this is the rush into using the current blueprint copies. Then we've got the exact reverse, someone that's not struggling with oversupply. So, and here the increased volumes are clearly creating this one-year high point for Noxium above 2000 ISK. Crazy high price for Nox, 2040 for the sellers, 1900 for the first buyer. They're starting to hesitate here. I think the market is indeed also seeing, well, this is basically double the regular volumes, so this is a little bit of a bubble action that will eventually come back down on regular production cycles and may even take a little bit of a hit when that oversupply, all those extra products, find their way to the market as well. Then we're moving on to Nullsec, which starts with Zydrine that went up to 2000 as well and is now making its way back down decently quickly to 1500. All right, 1600, 1550 for the first seller, 1500 as well for the buyers. Apparently buyers caught off guard a little bit by some fresh supply, and this is of course a crazy situation. Zydrine is now worth less than Noxium, or going for a lower price than Noxium. Also, you do see a volume increase, but it's not as robust, I would say, as for the Noxium market. And here, a bit of a price response that's being plugged very quickly back to that normal 1500. So here, I do think that this is just the market anticipating eventually this extra supply will this extra demand will stop. Then we get Megasite, same thing. I think, yeah, this basically had only 1 day of a massive volume increase that has been absorbed very quickly as we make our way back down to 640 for most sellers, 606 for the buyers. This is back in that regular Megasite trade range that we've seen for the last couple of months. And then we've got our Morphite that is slowly going down here. I also do think that the market is somewhat reading into what was mentioned in the live stream. That is, if I'm not mistaken, that the CSM member that was there mentioned that, yes, a complaint you could say that he receives quite often is that at the moment the need for Morphite for Tech 2 production in pretty much anything like guns and everything is creating this incredibly high price, and it's hurting manufacturing. There is basically not available enough, too rare. And you know, CCP said, we're gonna look into that, right? This is the type of feedback that they want when it comes to industry changes, and so they're definitely responsive to that. And now we're starting to see a little bit of pressure here on probably expectations that eventually CCP will do something about the morphied market. 63,000 for the sellers, 60,000 for the buyers. I mean, it's still 60k ISK for a single unit of morphite. It's quite a lot, especially if you remember back in the days before all of these changes. I used to invest in morphite when it went for less than 10,000 ISK, and those days are well, very far away, it seems, at the current price, but it's on CCP's radar in all likeliness. That's still speculation, but I do think that CCP wants to have that correct balance between availability and the needs for the whole economy. They don't want just really a single product being the bottleneck, the one constraint for a whole series of industries. So that's probably, although, well, they just introduced that, you could say, in industry, but they don't want it to be like really too bad. They will use that as a lever, basically, to try and get things in the place that they want. And I'm not sure that they want morphite at like 75,000 ISK. But again, that's my speculation. Next up, the PI market coming in at 2050. Alright, let's get started here and see if the trend continues. Here we see a little bit of hesitation, but very nice recovery of broadcast nodes, making its way back to 1.75 million. Sellers are at 1.7, buyers at 1.6. Pretty reasonable margin, basically a bit of a recovery and some hesitation at the tail end, but we've seen that pattern before, so we're not going to call this the turnaround, the turnover just yet. We're going to see what happens next week. And what could give us a sign are the others. Here's construction blocks. Oh man, these daily averages, these points are all over the place, from 9,000 all the way back down here to what is this one? Let's see if I can grab it. 7.3, so that's a very big swing. Sellers are at 8.3, buyers are at 6.7. Yeah, these are apparently averages where sellers are able to dominate the market, and it's mostly people coming in buying from the sell orders that are creating this average price. And then a couple days later, it's the exact opposite. You've got some producers that have trucked over all of their construction blocks and they just started dumping to those buyers. So still a very volatile market and very far from its historical averages, still trading pretty damn low. Consumer electronics, same thing. Yeah, exact same pattern, in fact. So we actually have a high point here where we were trading on average for 9,300 ISK. We're still selling for, no, we're selling back down to 8k, buyers at 7.1. So it is supply that is starting to overtake here again. Then we've got coolants that's doing the same thing, albeit a little bit more slowly and structurally. 7.2 for the sellers, 6.4 for the buyers. All right, we can go over these a little bit more quickly, I think. Cryoprotectant solutions, pressure is back, and buyers are at 95,000, below 100k. I would say if you want to be ready for a potential CCP implant announcement, try to grab some cryoprotectants below 100,000 ISK. That's definitely what I'm trying to do. Enriched uranium then recovered a little bit and is apparently holding on. 8.7 for the sellers, 7.9 for the first buyer, but then look how quickly we go back down. 7.5, 7.2, 7,000, 6.7. So there's still probably more supply. Don't expect this to continue to go back up. Integrity response drones for the advanced PI materials tied to the structures, that seems to be a little bit better, and it's actually a comment that we should have kept in mind a little bit more. The needs for what the hell is it called? I'm gonna find it here, I think, in manufacturing, and then materials, let's see, reactions, there we go, that's it. The needs for reactions are going to become a lot greater. This is why people are already preparing more structures, or expecting that we will need a lot more structures to just have more reaction cycles going throughout the game. But it will probably also have a big disruption on other industries that require these reactions right now. Tech 2 and Tech 3, very important to keep that in mind, that yeah, more reactions needed in Tech 1 as well will have an impact on the rest of the economy as well. And so here is that the market's preparing for that, of course. More structures, more advanced PI, and integrity response zones have managed to recover back to 2 million ISK. 2 million for the sellers, almost 1.9 for the buyers. I can actually get a drink here for a sec. There we go. What the hell? Oh. One of my cables was stuck below the chair, but let's move on to the mechanical parts, where we get this little recovery away from the bottom, but then we clearly are stalling. And again, with these daily averages, you can see that here on a big volume day we went up, but then it's starting to edge back down pretty quickly. 7.5 for the sellers, 6.8 for the buyers, leaving a pretty nice gap for something that normally costs 10,000 ISK. Nanite is actually making its way back up a little bit, but for how long? 6.2 for the sellers, 5.2, 5,200 for the buyers. Yeah, that's just a little bit above here. So this is already again being oversupplied, I think. Nano Factories recovered to 900,000 ISK and is able to stay there. 920 for the sellers, 870 for the buyers. Organic mortar applicators actually shot up to practically a 1-year high point on a single day, where it went up to almost 1.2 million ISK. Right now it is at 855. That's a bit of pressure that's showing up here. 776 for the buyers. All right, recursive computing modules, one that hadn't really recovered that well, already starting to show signs of pressure as well. 115 million and 1 million for the buyers. I mean, it's away from the bottom, but it's clearly seeing some pressure here. Robotics back under pressure as well. Where are those buyers? At 61,000, 63,000 for the first seller. Again, it's just supply that's coming online here, and that is just trying to grab these better prices, but is now already suffocating the market. Couple of exceptions, as I've said. Advanced PI materials, definitely a couple of these still doing well. Full recovery for self-harmonizing power cores, almost 2 million ISK for the sellers, 1.6 for the buyers. Bit of a gap, but definitely a very healthy sell price. Serial conduits is seeing the pressure again, down to 1 million for the sellers, 950 for the first buyer. Yukomi superconductors, what are those doing? Actually jumped up to 75k, 62 for the sellers. What would I wait for? You know, when I saw this spike here, right, I was dreaming of being able to buy below 50k. It just never materialized, unfortunately. So I would say look for those low points, probably 60,000. If you can still buy below 60,000, that would be my Yukomi superconductor jumping points if you want to again be ready for implants. And then we get wetware mainframes, not a full recovery, bit of pressure at the end here again, but definitely respectable. 1.8 million for the sellers, 1.7 for the buyers. So PI had a little bit of a bump up due to these industry changes, and it's mostly that the expectations of we'll need more reactions. That means we'll need more structures, and that has reverberated through the market. But looks to me like all of those entities have basically gotten what they wanted and needed. We were talking 1-year low prices pretty much when they started to come in here, and as a result this probably won't last very long anymore, and we're starting to see some pressure on most of these products already. Next up, advanced Mo materials. That's coming in at 28.50. Alright, and let's get started here. Of course, first of all, these carbides. Here is crystalline carbide jumping up quite high, 215 for the sellers, 200 for the buyers. 1-year high point, definitely a breakout from its normal range. So this is basically in all likeliness being hit twice. First of all, we had to change to the Marauders, which made them very powerful, very popular. You may have seen me fly the Golem, crazy mission ship, and on that 30-second cycle for its Bastion module, it doesn't feel like it's that constraining. It really feels like you still have the option to respond to maybe a gank, problems with the rats, things like that, positioning. So it's just become very, very powerful and very popular, probably in the mission running scene, or just as one of those battleships for the events and things like that as well. I think it's gonna crush my former passive rattlesnake, to be honest. So as a result, yeah, a lot more demand for these Marauders, which were pretty much as big a combat item that you could make for Tech 2 had increased demand substantially already. And then the industry changes are probably going to make it harder for reactions. Then of course, right, this is a reaction material, so you can expect lower supplies as other stuff needs to be created through reactions, and here is the market response to that. Let's take a look at the Caldari one that was already, Caldari is here. Titanium carbide, that was already actually very volatile. So this bit here was already volatile, going from probably 180 down to 150, quite wavy. Then we broke out to 200, then we broke out to 250 and now we're breaking out to 350. We're slowly recovering from that. That's not too sustainable, but this was already the volatile one that has just gone completely bonkers on all of these changes. We're talking 354 ISK for the sellers, 306 for the buyers. Man, we could have bought right here at really very noticeable low points below 150, and we would have more than doubled our ISK if we had taken the leap a couple of months ago. But who would have expected CCP to come out with these kinds of changes all of a sudden? I know I didn't. Next up, we've got the Minmatar one, yeah, Fernite carbide right here, double jump up to also 1 year high point at around 200. It's 200 for the sellers, 194.5 for the buyers. That's a super narrow margin, and here again, buy below to 125. You could have done so before we were off to the races. And then we've got tungsten carbide for Amar. That was the exact opposite of Caldari, the one that really lacked volatility, and this one was basically at first 200-ish, then above 150 to 200, and then it broke down below 150, where it was constantly just super stable over the course of like several months, 3 months here, 3 months here, 3 months here. But now, right, this was our opportunity. You could have bought it at probably the lowest price ever, and at, let's see here, take an average 130-ish, and now we get our 2 steps up Marauder change, and then of course the industry changes with the needs for more reactions. 240 for the sellers, 238 for the buyers, practically doubling in price over the course of 1.5 months. Very impressive stuff, and yeah, some people here, you can clearly see that on the volumes as well, have made their moves, and they're looking at quite a bit of profit if they haven't sold too early. Now we get to metamaterials. So far they haven't moved too much in the previous EVE talk, so let's go take a look at that. Photonic metamaterials for Calente, bit more volumes, slowly edging up. Yeah, this is a reaction material, so why the hell is this one not moving up as much? Alright, at least that leaves a little bit of stability. 13,600 for the sellers, 12,400 for the buyers. This one is clearly away from the bottoms and slowly, I think, going towards an above average for like the last 6 months or so. But historically speaking, this is still pretty cheap. Then we've got for Caldari the non-linear metamaterials. Again, the king of volatility was clearly Caldari Tech 2. This was already pretty good, right? 26k down to 20, back up, back down, back up, back down, back up again. This was very nice, and then here now we had our spike to 35, but it's being absorbed quite easily. 25,000 for the sellers, 22,400 for the buyers. It's above average. This one is clearly you know, at a little bit of a premium, but it's not crazy and a pronounced 1 year high point or anything like that. Then we've got our Minmatar one, plasmonic metamaterials, a bit of a bump again, up to 30k. That's being absorbed quite quickly. So we're talking 22,000 for the sellers, 21,000 for the buyers. It's expensive, it's above average, but not too crazy. And then finally terahertz metamaterials, that has just done its climb up to, well, a 1 year high point, but that is not completely you know, out of sync with this full 1 year chart. It's basically a full recovery to 22,500, 21.5 for the buyers as well. So I would say Tech 2 in all likeliness will be impacted here due to the changes to the reactions that are needed in industry, and they're probably looking at higher prices because of that. But PI has shown that the capacity is being scaled up, so I personally think that we will eventually just recover from that. Then we've got Fermion, the other advanced materials. Those had a bit of a recovery, but generally we're actually starting to see some pressure at the tail end. So it's this one for fermionic condensates. Sellers are holding on to 71,000 almost, but buyers down to 65.7. starting to open up that gap again. Ferrogel, ooh, no, well, there's exceptions, obviously. Reaction material up to 40,000, back on its average. In fact, it's 48,000 for the sellers. On a lack of supply, buyers forced up to 40k. Ferrogel, full recovery. If you have some investments in that stuff, you have a very nice opportunity to sell at a massive profit. Fullerite did a bit of a jump, but that one is being squashed already. 1,000 for the sellers, 922 for the buyers. So this one is already heading back to this region. Hypersynaptic fibers, that's slow. Decline back down to 9k. 9 nanotransistors, bit more volatility, but again being filled very quickly down to 5,000. Again, it's slow range for the normal averages. Phenolic composites managed to recover, but the pressure seems to be on. Let's see if the gap's opening up. 1,700 for the sellers, 1,584. That's not too bad just yet, but I do think that we will go down pretty quickly here, seeing a little bit of pressure. It is a reaction material though, so there's maybe that usage problem that will keep the bottom from falling out. Like here, ceramic fibers actually complete recovery up to 500 disc and able to stay there pretty easily. 520 for the sellers, 462 for the buyers. Probably like needed somewhere all of a sudden, increasing what this is, yeah, the capital ships all of a sudden probably increasing in demand quite substantially, and the market is keeping that premium going. Next up, Take-Two ships, that's at 36.5. Like that. Let's go over these and take a look at the reaction. Alright, Basilisk, 1 year high point, a breakout up to 280 million. Caldari, the volatility, lovely chart to trade in. 230 down to the 180, probably at the lowest points. You could have probably bought these for 180 and below. That's definitely tradable, and now is your sell opportunity. 272 million for the sellers, 240 for the buyers. Now I remember back in the day, I think it was with the introduction of the Raiteru, right, the industry facility, where we had this massive decline, you could say, of the range of Take-Two ships all of a sudden. And it was always looking for that new range. I think with the industry changes for Take-Two ships, we could be looking at the exact same thing. But what's not known to me personally is, will the guys that are doing a reaction be able to scale up their reaction facilities fast enough for us to actually basically fully recover from all of this, to get back on the old supplies? Or will we always have that as basically a constraint, meaning that we will be looking for a higher average price for these Take-Two ships? It actually was took a very long time for us to spot those new bottoms. Like for instance, I think it was for the frigates, we were looking at below 20 million all of a sudden to buy, where before you could have probably bought for like below 25 million or something like that, and be like 100% sure, or maybe it was even below 30 million, and you could be sure that, all right, that purchase, it's gonna make me ISK at one point in the recovery, and that was really difficult to do. So here this Basilisk clearly breaking out to a new high point. Will this mean a new range? That's the real question for Take-Two, of course, and if it does, what will that be? So Basilisk, very pronounced high point here. Sell, sell, sell if you have one. You can definitely make some ISK here. Then we've got the Cerberus, also Caldari, also 1 year high point, breaking out to 300 million ISK, 304 for the sellers, 271 for the buyers. And yeah, just about a month ago, could have bought these for probably 220-ish or something like that. So that's already looking like a nice profit for you to take. Then we've got the Guardian also starting to go back up here. Definitely more of an MR chart, right? Lacking in volatility and that slow downtrend towards 180 million at the low point. In fact, if it's very low point, you could have probably bought for 160 pretty easily. We are now selling for 235. Buyers coming in at 207. And yeah, this does feel like there is something changing here in Take-Two. We may be looking for that new range. Now, our frigates are a little bit less impacted by that, probably because they're the smallest and the most available one. So they still have a little bit of inertia, but eventually I'm personally still expecting that to happen here as well. So the Hound is still selling for less than 25 million, buyers at 22. Honestly, I'd maybe look into grabbing a couple at this point. Then we get the Ikitursa, still flat at around 750, I'm gonna say here, so no big changes for Triglavian stuff. After that we get the Ishtar, there it is again, Galente ships. I mean, we saw definitely high points in the production costs, and so here we went down from 200 million and now up to 251, so that's already a 25% profit, definitely in the sell range here as well. After that we get the Manticore, small frigate, and it's called Dari, so at least it had some volatility, moving from less than 25 to 30 million on some occasions, but now we're seeing actually some pressure. 26.5 for the sellers, 24 million for the buyers. You're buying Manticores below 25 million. That's not that bad if you're expecting this, of course, to start to ripple through to the smallest ships as well. Then we've got the Munin. Even the Minmatar ones are not at bottom ranges anymore. This one is back slightly above average. 230 almost for the sellers, 212 for the buyers. Then here's our Nemesis. Oh man, this is a buy signal for me personally. 22 for the sellers, less than 20 million for the buyers. I am going to set up a buy order, try to grab a couple of these for less than 20 million. I think there's gotta be a return in that. I mean, come on, everything else is pushing up, and here the Nemesis is basically at a 1 year low point for the buyers. Next up here we get the Oneros pushing up, back up to 200 million, 203 for the sellers, 181 for the buyers. Unless it has something to do with the industry changes, with the base, yeah, maybe a little bit of expectation that the rule, you could say, that we saw in Tick 1, where the smallest stuff, which is frigate destroyers, cruisers though, becomes cheaper, that they're expecting that to push through, and maybe just take one, because I mean a Cerberus is a cruiser, so you would expect that here as well. Yeah, no, doesn't make too much sense to me to say, all right, Tick 2 frigates are actually gonna go down in price. I'm not sure here, so this could be an opportunity. All right, Oneros, as we've said here, definitely seeing the volatility back here, and trading at 200 million, back on its normal average. Then we get the Panther, a couple of battleships, big ships here that are then the exact opposite of the smallest one, massively impacted of course by all of these changes. Number one, the Marauders, right, that became so much more popular, sucked in a lot more of the material, so the Panther went up in price already. Here's the big volume that shot the price up to 1.5 billion, and now of course we get industry that is starting to also take up more of the reaction cycles, and so the Panther is now up to 1.6 billion ISK, 1.5 for the first buyer. Yeah, you get a pony up the ISK if you want to fly a Panther now. And then we get our Purifier, actually just went up to 35 million, but is already recovering quite nicely. 27 for the sellers, and you're buying below 25 million. I mean, either the market knows something I don't, which is entirely possible, or you get a nice opportunity. Scimitar is back at 200 million. Yeah, this one, its volumes aren't that great. 210 almost for the sellers, 190 for the buyers. Not a massive breakout here just yet. The Widow though went up to almost 2 billion on the day. Yep, exactly. And is now selling for 1.7, buyers coming in at 1.5, clearly showing that, yeah, materials are expensive. These battleships take a lot of materials. They have become very expensive all of a sudden as well. And then the Zealot, even the Zealot is moving back up a little bit at 220 for those sellers. All right, let's take a look at Tick 3 next. I'm just gonna leave that on the floor, sorry about that. Cable management, you saw it's not my strong point. A little bit of drinking, let's move on to the Tick 3 market, coming in at 43.40. Like that, and as always, let's take a look at the destroyers first. Here is the Confessor that jumped up to 60 million, and I was like, all right, can't really tell what's happening. Now we do see a very clear volume reason for this one, so a lot of buying, and as was explained here, maybe we can even see that, I'm not sure, if we go for industry, and then you've got some of this stuff will probably, I'm expecting like the fullerene stuff, yeah, there we go, melted nano ribbons, but this is probably that, PD fibers, and that's a reaction blueprint. And so here the expected impact is we're gonna have higher prices because there's less slots available for reactions, and that's going to up the prices here. So 56 million for the sellers, 52 million for the buyers. They have been forced up as well. Last 24 hours a full page, but the supply feels quite okay. So this is the same question as with Tech2. Are we moving to a higher range, or will we recover from this on new lines of reactions? Well, the Hecate's hesitating. The Hecate's saying, well, we may be staying right where we are, still below 50 million. 49 for the sellers, 45 for the buyers. Supply in 24 hours has dried up, but there's still some here available that are apparently keeping the Hecate market in check. Let's see what the Jackdaw has done. On no volumes, jumped up to 50, but is already recovering. 50 million for the sellers, 46 million for the buyers, and that is of course on a lot of supply, including 31, 35, 35. That's 100 ships basically coming in here very quickly. And so for the Confessor, the market is apparently saying, yeah, this is gonna go nuts, and we are going to be able to ask a very big price, but supply is already, I think, starting to trickle in quite heavily. The Hecate is saying the exact opposite. They're saying no, the industry guys are gonna scale up pretty easily. We're staying at 50 million, and the Jackdaw says a little bit of a panic moment, but supply is already taking advantage of that price and is already starting to move that back down towards a 50 average. And then finally we get this Vapor that yeah, was already making its way back down on some oversupply, and is now, I mean, this is going to stall that, of course, and it's going to absorb some supply. So we're back at 46 for the sellers, 42 for the buyers, half a page in the last 24 hours, just one order of 10. So this is, yeah, this to me is still not a short thing. This is not, all right, we're gonna move to a 55 million range for these destroyers. There's definitely a little bit of volatility on uncertainty in the market, and this one big Confessor spike is basically throwing us all off a little bit. But if the Hecate's any sign, oh no, the Jackdaw, excuse me, is any sign here, we had a speculative jump up in price, but that's being squashed very quickly by supply. It's creating a little bit more breathing room in this Vapor, basically. That's it. So I'm not sure if we are going to expect a big jump up in the range for the Tech 3 ships because of these changes just yet. Also keep in mind, there's definitely a high chance, I would say, that you will then have a dev block for Tech 2 and a dev block for Tech 3 as well, with changes coming to all of that. Next up, we've got our cruisers. Here is the Legion, basically recovering from a double spike up to 230 at its high point. 185 for the sellers, 164 for the buyers. Availability feels like it's okay, nothing too crazy, and volumes are clearly up a little bit from time to time, but not completely nuts either. Then we've got the Loki. Let's take a look at that. Actually going up in price here towards a high point, almost 200, but first seller at 180 is coming in, so some aggressive selling is happening here as well. Volume's actually down on an increased price, so this won't last too long. If you happen to have gambled maybe on a Loki for like 170 or something like that here, you can definitely try to do your sale. Then we get a Proteus, also 1 year high point, almost 190, 174 for the buyers, but the volumes are already down as well, so I don't have too good an explanation as to what's happening here. And then the Tengu, slightly down volume, slightly up price, definitely above average at almost 190, 180 for the buyers. Couldn't tell you here for this cruiser market, maybe a little bit of impact, right? This is up, this is up, this is up, and this one is down, but coming from a 1 year high point. Maybe here there's also like a little bit of worry of, yeah, what about the production cycles for Tech 3 ships now that we'll need that much more in reaction stuff for, well, the bulk of industry, of course, because Tech 1, we're talking just the base Tech 1 ships, but also capital ships and all of that stuff. It's just such a bigger market. What's the impact going to be on its smaller brother, Tech 3? It's a little bit unknown, but I would say it's not a sure bet that, yeah, we're gonna go up in prices because of all of that. Only the Confessor is really showing that gamble now. The Jackdaw is completely ignoring, the Hecate is completely ignoring it, and the Jackdaw is already showing that, yeah, supply is there when it's needed. We'll take advantage of these high prices and we'll plug those gaps pretty effectively. So that's my read on that market. And then now for the extra product, we're coming in at 49.20. I have chosen salvaged materials. I wanted to take a look at that because we had advanced PI going up, minerals still going up, all ships going up, and then we have plex starting to bottom out a little bit. That should suck in so much ISK. There's gotta be somewhere where we're talking low points, low points, low points. So I'm kind of wondering, this week we'll take a look at salvaged materials. Next week I'll take a look at some faction modules, I think, and see where the hell is that, you know, that is coming from. Let's take a look here. So that should be manufacturing and research, materials, and then salvage materials. We'll take a quick look at some of these ancients as well. Mostly I'm just interested in charts, so nothing too special here. Yeah, around average, actually a little bit below average, but you know, not like you would expect. You know, what I'm looking for is basically a straight 1 year down chart. That would be the opposite of what the minerals have been doing. And so here, this is clearly trading at the low end. This one's doing okay at 20. That's a bad chart to read, not enough volumes. Heuristics, self-assemblers, that one's down to 1 year low point. Yeah, I do think that some supplies from wormhole space will probably be like nano ribbons, 75k. I used to go into wormhole space day trip and have like 3 million for a single melted nano ribbon. So that's clearly a very deflated price, and then even a volume spike like this is just not moving the price that much. Modified fluid router, these, not all of them are at 1 year low points, but a lot of these do seem to be struggling when it comes to price. It is a small market though, so let's look at the regular. So ancient salvage materials, clearly a lot of these are below average, but it's not really like a full 1 year deflation. And then our regular salvage materials, let's take a look at that one. Alloyed titanium, you know, starts the year at 8k. Here it goes down to 3000 ISK, and now a little bit of a bump, but definitely at a low range. But armor plates, right, still back at a regular 40k. That's pretty healthy. Artificial neurotransmitters, bad chart really in the volumes, so that's not too good. This is below average. Burnt logic circuits, clearly struggling in the last 6 months here, from 45,000, losing around a third of its price down to 30k, currently trading at a 1 year low point. That's quite noticeable. But then we get an opposite here, capacitor control circuits. That's probably take 2 because of the blue icon here, trading for almost 700,000 ISK for a piece of salvage material. That's quite a lot. Short microcircuits, yeah, take 1. Look at that jump, 1 year high point, 750. God damn it, I still haven't found conductive polymers. Just breaks out from 10k to 20k in the last month. That's all right. Well, I may have been mistaken. It's probably not in salvage materials. This to me kind of makes sense as well. Right now we're seeing this big rush on producing stuff with the old blueprints. Who's to say that salvage is not in the crosshairs as well? So that could be a reason. And number 2, of course, all those ships will probably need rigs as well. And so here we go, conductive polymers, 1 year high point, double the price over the last month. And I was expecting something that would look like 25k at the start, 5k at the bottom. Well, not that bad, but maybe 10 to 15k at the bottom. So this is really not what I was expecting in salvage materials. Conductive thermoplastics breaking out all of a sudden as well here. What are they selling for? Starts the year, average price very stable, and we're talking 13,000 ISK. We're now selling these for 42,000. Yeah, that's not down in value. That hasn't deflated. Jesus. Contaminated, actually working on its way back to 150. Nanite compounds, that one is still trading a little bit below average. But look at that current pump. Complete breakout in the last 2 months from 10k, selling now for 40,000 ISK. Is that Take-Two related? Yeah, that is Take-Two related. That is not. I mean, it feels like it's too late to be the war. Damaged artificial neural networks, very common, but look at that, all of the year below 400, and it's or below 500, now selling for 700. Okay, I was not expecting this, guys, but this is up. Salvage is up for not all of them, obviously, but a lot of these are up quite a lot. That's the trick stuff or Edencom stuff. Actually a bit of volatility, and the high points are trading pretty well for fright interface circuits, a super common one. Eden.com, and here is an exception, but it's not like full deflation. This is just volatility down to 1 year low point for impetus consoles. It's still 240,000 disk. Intact armor plates, bit of pressure here as well. Intact shield emitters actually up then. Interface circuits up as well here. Look at that. Trading for most of the year below 10,000 disk and now selling for 14k for most. So that's another 50% increase. Logic circuits, look at that. Look at that here, below 500,000, now trading for 800,000 disk. All right, so it's a much more nuanced picture, guys, in the salvage market. I was expecting to see the ISK flow out of this market and into minerals, into advanced materials at the tail end. That should have really given it another knockdown if that's what was happening. But no, this is easily sustained by the market. Nanite compounds at 500,000 disk. Also an increase of over 50% from those low points here about 6 months ago. Power circuits trading at high range. That TIC2 stuff is really doing well. Power conduits trading high. This is very interesting. Tangled power circuits, something that's, you know, pretty damn common, starts just 2 months ago at 50k, which was the range for the whole year. So if you were expecting here to see that decline, we should have started where we're ending, and we're actually ending at 240,000 disk, almost 5 times the price of 2 months ago. Well, if you were expecting salvage to be down, and this is also on TIC2 salvage drones, the new better salvage drones that are out there as well. So our salvage potential in general in the game should have gone up, and it's still not enough. Super impressive and unexpected. Even telemetry processors just went for a high point. So this is interesting. A couple of them are clearly struggling, but overall it's not that bad a situation in the salvaged materials market, guys. So yeah, next week I'm gonna take a look, I think, at some of those faction modules, wrappers, things like that were going for crazy prices. I mean, it's gotta be somewhere, and we are going to find it. But that's it for this week, guys. This is Eve Talk. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.